Vectors, welcome, let's go. Addition of vectors. Meanwhile, before I continue talking about this vector, when we divide our graph into three axes, we have the x, y, and z. We divide it into an axis. Of course, this is, so you will now notice this is the x, this is, of course, this is the y, and this is the z axis. And in vectors, be very careful in this. The I, x is associated I, this is I, this is j, and this is k. The x is associated with the I, and y is associated with the j, and the z is associated with the what? The k. So, of course, we are still in introduction, and I want you to know something. In vectors, be very careful. I times I will give you 1. J times j is equals to 1. K times k is still equals to 1. When we reach to the proper introduction, I start giving example, it will start making sense to you. Look at what I'm saying again. In vector, in the addition of vectors. Let's enter into adding vectors proper. If you have, for example, when two vectors are moving parallel to each other, you add them. Note it very well. When vectors are moving parallel, they are moving at the same side, they move towards the same side, you add them. But when they are moving opposite to each other, you subtract them. Look at what I'm saying. And before I enter into this example, I want you to know something. Now, of course, using the map, this is the north. We have done something like this. This is the east, or this is south, and here is west. Now, be careful with this. Be very careful with this. If peradventure you have a force of 100 Newton, you can see that it's moving towards the east. And you have another force of 50 Newton. You can see they are moving towards the same direction. Here is 50 Newton. And I ask you to add these vectors together. Add these vectors together. You will now see that the answer will be, of course, 100 plus what? 50. And that will give you what? 150 Newton. And still, it will have to be going towards the what? Towards the east direction. Because that was where they are going to. So that's why I said, when vectors are of the same kind and they are moving towards the same direction, you add them to what? Together. If they are moving towards opposite direction, you subtract one from each other. Another example of this is, what if you have a vector like this? This is 200 Newton. You have another one here, and this should give you 120 Newton. Now, one is moving towards the west, east. The second one is moving towards the west. But you can see they are moving in opposite direction. This one is going this way, and this one is going this way. So you have to subtract one from the other. You have to subtract one from the other. So what I'm now saying is, your answer, and when you want to subtract, it has to be the bigger one from the smallest one. So this is 200 minus 120, and that should give you what? 80 Newton. Now be very careful. This is very tricky. The direction of movement of this vector is west, east. This answer, the direction should be what? East. Why? Because this one is 200. The vector will tend to move towards the one that will have the what? Bigger value. Are you seeing it? So once you minus from each other, they will ask you what is the direction. The direction is towards the what? East. Now we have another one here. This is a classwork. This is a classwork. And if you are watching online, pause the video, pause it, and try it out. Pause it. Remember, we are still in introduction. What if you have a vector 60, a vector that is 60 Newton, and It's moving in this direction, and here is 90 Newton. What would your answer be now? So this is, since they are in opposite direction, you minus 90 minus 60 should give you 30. Now, towards which way will the vector move? You can see that it will move what? Towards the what? West. Why? Because 90 is greater than 60. So when you subtract, it should be moving towards the one that have the what? The largest number. Are you with me? Good. So that should be very, very okay for you to solve. What if you have an example like this? You have 80 Newton, and then you have another one moving this way, and it's 120 Newton. What will be the answer? So you can see that they are moving at the opposite side. They are both moving opposite side. So this will be 120 minus 80, which will give you what? This will give you 40 Newton. And it will be going towards the what? South. Why? Because the 120 is greater than what? 80 Newton. And it's moving towards the what? South. So the direction of your vector will be what? Towards the what? The south. Are you guys with me? Good. Now, we are, of course, from the simplest one, we'll start going to the one that is more tricky. So what if you have something like this? A vector moving towards this direction. This is 30 Newton. And another one moving towards here. This is 40 Newton. You can now see that this place make an angle of 90 degrees. That means it's perpendicular. And if it's perpendicular to each other, we can now form a triangle, is it not? We can now form a triangle. So this should be like this. This should be like this. So this is 30 Newton. This is 40 Newton. And we want you to calculate here. So you are going to use the Pythagoras theorem to get your answer. And this should be, if I call this S, so this would be X is what? Square root of 30 square plus what? 40 square. And that will give you what? 30 square is, if you plus this thing together, you get 500, and you put it straight away, what you're going to get is 500 Newton. So be careful when they give you a vector that they are moving in opposite side, or one is perpendicular to each other. And anybody can ask you, what is the angle between this vector? What is the angle? Of course, the angle is, if they want you to find this angle, it should be tan theta is y all over x. Tan theta should be y all over x. And of course, this is going towards the y, this is the x direction. So, if I ask you to calculate the angle now, the theta will be tan inverse of 40 divided by 30, right? So, and of course, this should give you 53.1, I guess, 53.1 degrees. So the angle between them is 53.1 degrees. Remember, we are finding angle because they are perpendicular. Is there any question? You have any question? Good. So square root of 30 square plus square root of 40 square is 50 Newton, not 500 Newton. Be very careful about that. Do not make that mistake like I just did. Now, under this, we'll still continue. Remember, whenever you have two angles, they are perpendicular to each other, you form a right angle triangle. That is it for this video.